EDU 5, TEA Assessment 2, Professional Experience Reflection, Part A, Indigenous Education Presentation. So, my introduction and the overview of what I'm going to talk about through this presentation. So, the method area I'm going to look at is Outdoor and Environmental Studies. The year level that I'm going to look at is Year 12, and that is because in my professional experiences, all my professional experiences have been with later year students. The learning intentions is VCE Unit 3, which looks at relationships with outdoor environments. The criteria is through a SAC. The resources required is IITC, Unit 3 content from the BACC website, and field trips, guest speakers, and visual and audio, and then assessment of students' work is through a SAC. So the curriculum to support Indigenous students. So through my class of outdoor and environmental studies, looking at Unit 3 outcomes through VCE in relation to relationships in outdoor environments, I will enable the students to go on field trips to various different locations and look at the different relationships that individuals have had with the land, starting at Indigenous history and then followed through to European and multicultural backgrounds and their relationships with the outdoor environments. So in the field trips, we could visit various places such as Ayers Rock or closer to home, Barmer, and we can get outside individuals such as educational speakers such as the Yorta Yorta speakers in Barmer to talk to the students about their relationships to the land, and then they can give a deeper insight into the content, whereas my background is from the European perspective. Getting an educational speaker such as a Yorta Yorta speaker in just enables a deeper connection with the students who may be Indigenous, and just a deeper connection to students in general on the Aboriginal history and relationships with the land. I would also like community influence into how we go about discussing relationships into land, and I would really like to foster the Indigenous pedagogy of interrelatedness and everyone's involved, and I would like to bring in that aspect through allowing families to help bring the curriculum through the VC unit to life. Strategies in ensuring students are supported. So the strategies that I would like to bring into my class of outdoor and environmental studies is the use of verbal interactions and instructions. So through the research that I've done, it's become apparent that students in Indigenous backgrounds and also other backgrounds tend to prosper in learning the content through verbal interactions. A lot of Indigenous backgrounds are developed around this use of storytelling, so verbal interactions enables them to grasp concepts better, I believe, and just instructions. So most of their instructions are passed in laws and and things are passed down through elders. So my instructions would also be verbal. I'd also like to use ICT, that are also visual and audio. In this century, a lot of children are quite accustomed to using technology, and so I'd like to use that aspect to engage and support students' learning. So I would look at the unit and looking at relationships to the land, and I would incorporate the Indigenous history at the start. I wouldn't put it out on its own. I would incorporate that with the European and multiculturalism aspects into relationships to the land. Again, I would use that community influence and the pedagogy from what I believe is through the Indigenous background. I would use that to enable everyone to be incorporated and everything to be enabled for all students to be brought together. So NAIDOC Week. NAIDOC Week, NAIDOC stands for National Aboriginal and Islanders Day Observance Committee. So it can be traced from Aboriginal groups in the 1920s, and it's to create awareness of the status and treatment of Indigenous Australians. So in 2008, Kevin Rudd, our Premier in charge at the time, nationally apologised for the stolen generation. So NAIDOC helps provide more information about that and more information about the history of Indigenous communities as well as Torres Strait Islanders. So during NAIDOC week, the strategies that I would have in place is enabling students, so bringing guest speakers again, and these guest speakers may be Indigenous, such as park rangers and people that are still involved in managing the land, and I'd get them to talk about the roles and relationships they have and the conservation and management of the land that they have. I would then get the students to do various activities on the topics that are covered during NAIDOC week, and they may be on ITC, or they may be physical ways in enabling the students with Indigenous backgrounds to feel valued, and everyone may become aware of the history of Indigenous culture. So in cultural awareness, I'm going to look at Indigenous history in relation to conservation and management of land, cultural inclusivity. I'll look at Indigenous guest speakers, and they can talk about the roles and relationships, cultural competence, so that can go into the stories and environmental sustainability and the values of community to be brought to the students. So I would, the strategies in place would be through the ITC, and I would allow guest speakers as well as myself to enable students to become aware of Indigenous history, and so in getting the curriculum and the pedagogy across, I would use 2 online resources. that are culturally appropriate foster learning strategies and activities. So those two online resources that I would use is the AussieEducator.org website, which goes into various Indigenous resources that may be utilised. So I may use Dust Echoes, which is a visual and audio animated resource that talks about Aboriginals and their duty to the country and their laws. I would also use 8 Ways resource, in which talks about the different ways in which Aboriginal people learn, and so the curriculum and pedagogy of bringing others in, and the pedagogy of Indigenous, which I believe is all about interrelationships. I may bring in a guest speaker which can talk about the history. They may go outside and do links and stuff with the land. I then may enable during NAIDOC week the students to do the SAC, which may involve verbally telling a story and using symbols and images about all that they've learnt through all the information that they've learnt through the week, and that may be through Aussie Educators resources as well. And that concludes my presentation.